Hey friends, Mike Stenos here, back with you in the Bourbon Bar for another episode of Sten Reacts. This time I'll be reacting to Governor McKee's firing of a, quote, anti-Semite state employee for making public marks, pro-Palestinian, if you would, anti-Israeli remarks. So I'll get into that in a second, but just a reminder that in the Bourbon Bar, nothing like a whiskey and a fine charred oak tumbler. Let's get on. Okay, you might have seen the headline, and I'm sure it's been the talk of the town, and it's a legitimate talk. Governor McKee fires a staffer from his job for making pro-Palestinian comments critical of Israel. You could, I don't think he said it directly, you could imply that he has, said, called for the destruction of the Jewish race, if you would, and the land of Israel. Here is Mark's Miguel Sanchez. He is the person in question here. He's also a Providence city councilor. Here is his Twitter feed. McKee may have taken away my job, but he won't pressure me into silence. And of course, it's a warped view. The question here is this politically protected view. It's a warped view for sure. Talking about the genocide of innocent Palestinian civilians in Gaza and ignoring the genocide, the slaughter, the massacre of innocent Jews in Israel. There's quite a difference, as you and I both know, between the two. But to these leftist, woke, progressive radicals, who sadly increasingly are dominating the Democrat Party, and more on that in a second, they think the situation in Gaza is far worse. Here's he's gotten a lot of coverage. Here he is. Here's a ABC 6 story on him. He's had a lot of people, including Senator Tiara Mack, who we'll talk about shortly, support him in this, in the anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic trope that we see so many people use. Never again means never again. There are even some Jewish groups that are calling for peace. Now, of course, calling for peace in the Middle East means that doesn't allow Israel the chance to administer justice or revenge or finish the war that obviously the Palestinians started. However you want to look at it, Israel has a right to engage and wipe out their enemy. They are enemies. And folks, this is the way of the world. This is one thing that the left doesn't seem to understand. Pretty much every country, including our own, every country, its current borders or original borders were formed, changed over the decades through acts of war, conquest, often genocide, often massacre, however you want to call them. We had our major issues with the Indians here in North America, of course. You can either agree with the way we operated or not, but it's not the point. Conquest, war, massacre, civilian deaths, sometimes planned, sometimes a unintended consequence of war. Always has been the case in the world. And for these peace-loving dolts on the left who just think you can have a war, you can have these kinds of serious conflicts without there being mutual destruction of some kind, they're just not mature. They're immature, and they're not with the real world. All right, so let's get back. So let's get back to some thoughts on this. I'm not going to get into whether he should have been fired or not. I'm gonna comment a few things. By the way, here's Miguel Sanchez's post on the issue. Again, the atrocities in Gaza, ignoring the atrocities in Israel, of course. Is this protected speech? I don't think there's any doubt there's going to be a lawsuit on this. I don't think there is any doubt that there should be a lawsuit on this. But I also don't think there's any doubt that I congratulate Governor McKee for taking this bold action, even if he gets sued and even if he loses. this kind of nonsense intolerance by the tolerant progressive left woke should never be on display in any public figure. Not to this extent. Not with the stakes are this high. He may win his lawsuit. It's probably illegal to fire him, but it was the right thing to do to fire him. All right. So I support Governor McKee in this call. But here's the issue I want to get into today. I always like to look for the other side of the issue. And this has to do with the radicalism of the woke left, the left starting to eat their own. I'll get into all this in a second. And the curious case, I call it the curious case of Jews on the one hand as a protected class, oppressed victims themselves with all those hate crimes and hate, not just crimes, but hate words, hateful words, and actions obviously done against them over the years. So the Jews simultaneously serve as one of these oppressed, protected classes, victims, if you may, but they also serve as the oppressors themselves, as those who should be condemned and those who oppress others, and in this case, Jews oppressing the Palestinians, the poor Palestinian people, who, by the way, elected their own terrorist government in Hamas. I'm not saying they deserve what they're getting over there, but again, there are consequences. All I'm just saying, there are consequences to people's actions. You can't elect a terrorist group as your governing body and not expect there's going to be terror by them, on you. It's the way the world works, folks. That's the real world. But yet, back to the Jews. So they're both the oppressed class often, and now they're being positioned as the oppressor class. I think that's very interesting. I don't know many other groups of people that kind of serve that, large constituencies across the world who serve that kind of, it can go either way. Certainly the curious case of the Jewish people. But the larger issue here is how the left starts eating each other. We've been saying for years, whether it's environmentalists against, conservationists and naturalists and those who love the environment and the animals, that there are natural problems there. Like we're saying, windmills and solar farms killing birds and whales. That drives many people on the left crazy. But yet another group on the left wants to do everything they can with this green energy stuff. And they're starting to fight each other. So here we see this Israeli-Hamas conflict has really brought out the true identities and has definitely convinced me that what I've been saying all along is absolutely correct. It needs to happen. Needs to happen if the Democrat Party in Rhode Island and nationally wants to save itself. True identities are coming out. One protected, so what we're seeing here is how one protected class, in this case, the Palestinians, one victimized, oppressed class, the Palestinians, hold a higher rank in the pantheon of the left than do the Jewish protected class. When it's convenient for the left to position Jews as the oppressed victims, they do that. But now, since the Palestinians have more status on the left, it's convenient to position the Jews as the evil, warmongering oppressors, committing genocide and civilian massacres, which of course is not what's going on here. But again, and I don't know that it would permanently be Palestinians above Jews when it comes to the hierarchy on the left. But this is the way the left works. It's whatever is the cause du jour, if you will. What's the pop culture? What's the victim cause of the day we all want to mindlessly rally behind and take up the mantras and throw away whatever else we used to believe or advocate for? And right now we see it happening right before our eyes. The Palestinian people, indirectly, Muslims, I guess, but let's just keep it to the Palestinian people, are now the oppressed victim identity group of the jour, of the day. And everything else be damned, no matter everyone else on the left, on the right, be damned. Which one has the higher status? Clearly, the Palestinians and the Jews now have been thrown under the bus and thrown to the wolves. Increasingly, we see Democrats holding this position. I don't know many Republicans that are holding a pro-Hamas position. There probably are. But again, think of what's happening in the Democrat Party, right? I've been warning, well, think of some of the factions now. You've got, and some of the silliness of the left. We've got gays supporting Palestinians. Palestinians are Muslims. Muslims will murder gays for being gay, throw them off buildings, chop their heads off, whatever. They're not accepted in their society. But you got gays for Muslims. I mean, figure that one out. So again, the left starts eating its own, right? This Miguel Sanchez. Again, I don't want to make the story about Sanchez. I want to make it about this interesting case of the Democrat Party and its relationship with the Jewish state. You have the Democrat Socialists of America, which I believe this Miguel Sanchez is a member of, and so are others. And they're increasing their influence within the Democrat Party. Not only does Democrat Party in Rhode Island have basically 85% of the seats in the House and the Senate in our state, but increasingly, probably over 50% in each of those bodies now are, if not avowed Democrat Socialists of America, those who sympathize with the progressive woke Democrat Socialists of America agenda. Here's, for instance, Tiara Mack. Now, this is the famous twerking senator, and she's a sitting senator. Governor McKee cannot fire her from her job, but you, the voters, can. She stands in solidarity with Miguel Sanchez, again, pushing a ceasefire, calling what the Israelis are doing for fighting back, for waging a war, calling it a genocide, of course, which is just ignorant baloney from the left. Now, just to prove my point, here's how the courts, the courts aren't as objective, they don't follow the constitutional laws often as you think, but here the courts, back in 2018 ruled, the Supreme Court, the U.S. court ruled that Jews are a protected class. They're a protected race under the Civil Rights Act, even though they weren't specified in 1964. So you can't racially, is it religious discrimination? Is it racial? Well, they're basically saying it's racial discrimination. So this just proves that the Jews are a protected class. The question here is the Democrats in this state, and increasingly nationally, but especially in this state, have a major problem on their hand with this cancer growing. This woke, progressive Democrats, these socialists, Marxists, Democrat socialists within the Democrat Party are a cancer. I've been saying it for 5 or 6 years. Democrats needed to cut that cancer out 5 or 6 years ago. When I sat with Speaker Mattiello, when I sat with Speaker Shikarchin, we used to do a lot more legislative advocacy. I told them, how can you continue to allow these radical extremist people with these crazy views stay in your party? And they didn't answer, of course, but the answer is they wanted, if there's going to be 15 senators or there's going to be 32 House of Representatives who believe we need that power as Democrats. Well, that power is actually a cancer, and it's growing, and it could blow the Democrat Party in this state and nationally apart. I've said you ought to kick them out of their party and make them form their own party. Call it the Democrat Socialists of America Party if you want, whatever you want to call it. But they do not share the views of most. Now, how many of mainstream Democrats? Now, is there such a thing as mainstream Democrats anymore? Is everybody going crazy woke left? I don't know. But those who have gone crazy woke left aren't really Marxists, socialists, anti-Semites. They're just going along for the ride. Of course, there are many of those. There are anti-Semites. There are Marxists and communists and socialists for real who really believe these things. But what we've learned in politics is so much of politics is about people just going with the flow, following the path of least resistance, and hey, whatever the item of the day is, count me in. I'll support it if my tribal Democrat progressive left leaders tell me to do so. It's going to be really curious to see how Governor McKee, Speaker Shikarchi, Senate President Ruggiero handle this now very clear rift within the Democrat Party. You got one Democrat governor firing, and it's much more than the firing. It's drawing a public line in the sand. This Democrat will not support the views of those Democrats. These are severely opposite views. It's not just, do we have a $15 minimum wage or a $20? We're talking about diametrically opposite views. The line in the sand has been drawn now in this state. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? Well, Democrat leaders keep with their political greed and say, look, I don't care how big that cancer is. We need them as part of our party because they give us so many more seats and so much more power. And I will keep appeasing you or sticking my head in the sand when you do things so awful like Miguel Sanchez and Tierra Mack and others are doing. Or will they say enough is enough? We cannot compromise our principles. We cannot compromise what values we have left. We cannot tolerate you and your anti-Semitism, you and your hate for our country. We cannot tolerate that in our party anymore. What they do about it, I have no idea. But it's going to be a major problem. This war in Israel and in Gaza is not going to go away anytime soon. It's going to still be raging. There's still going to be calls for massacres from both sides. Only one of them is legitimate, as you know. When the General Assembly session opens in January, how are Democrat political leaders going to deal with this? I'll be very curious to find out. I think they need to be thrown out of their party. These woke, progressive, socialists, whatever you want to call them, let them form their own party. Let's have a three-party system in our state. It's the only way people can sleep at night and adhere to at least some of the values that they believe in. And it'll also be interesting to see who follows who. Like I said, the hard committed socialists and progressives and the woke and the anti-Semites, they will, if there is a split, whether it's a formal split or just a faction within the party, they'll stand firm. Question is all these mealy-minded, weak-kneed hypocrites who just stick their finger in the air and go wherever the wind blows them. Because as I said on a long dialogue the other day, I do not believe most of the people you see at the protests or most of the people on social media who are backing these pro-Palestinian positions or anti-Israeli positions, I don't believe they're necessarily anti-Semites. I don't believe they're smart enough. I don't believe they're informed enough to know whether they like or hate Jews as a race. I just think they're picking up, like we said, they're picking up the oppressed victim identity cry of the day, which right now is the poor Palestinian people in Gaza, and it is poor. It is tragic what's going on, but that is war, and that's what their political leadership asked for. Their political leadership started a war, and now they're paying the consequences tragically. And Israel has to finish the war. They have to finish the war. But the question is, all these blow in the wind, snowflake people who are just following this pro-Palestinian cry and battle cry or cry for peace, really, are doing so just for reasons they can't even begin to comprehend themselves. If they ask themselves, where will they go? Will they continue to blow with the wind over there, or will they return to their more moderate, if there are such a thing, any more moderate roots in the Democratic Party? I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this unfolds. It's not about the firing of this one person. It's about what's going to happen to this Democratic Party. Is the left, as I've been predicting, is the left going to finally start eating itself? And are the progressives, are the socialists, are the anti-Semites about to blow up our state Democratic Party? I thank you for tuning in to this edition of Sten Reacts. Outstanding stuff. Always drink in moderation. Your favorite adult beverage. This was clearly an adult topic today. All of my Sten React segments can be seen at the top of oceanstatecurrent.com from our watch drop-down menu list, and you can see them all there. All right. So for For Sten Reacts, Mike Stenhouse out. Let's return to our show.